How are the Marlins going to get better heading into 2024 if they don't acquire any players? There are 5 key steps, in my opinion anyway, where the Marlins could get significantly better in 2024 without adding dudes, but dudes that are currently on the roster performing better. Going to dig into all of those and more. Today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This, of course, is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Miami Marlins _UK. If you're listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe. This is your team every day, and thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel as well, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe over there too. Make sure you join the comments as well. Guys, it is Monday the 27th of November. There has not been a pod for a while. Most of you, I think, would have realized that I was away in Rome. First time in Rome, turning 40. I am now extremely jaded. I've got a cold. It may be COVID, unconfirmed. No tests. So I'm just going to say it's an old-fashioned cold or a flu. I don't know. Nevertheless, I'm not feeling amazing. The other thing to call out as well, since the last day I did a pod was last Wednesday, so I have to apologize for that. There was just no time for pod creations in Rome. The Colosseum, immense. Vatican City, immense. Pasta, wine, Negronis, immense. Everything was immense with that trip. There was no time for podcasting. But here's the good news. I missed nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing happened for the Marlins at all the way over Thanksgiving weekend. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Hope everyone had a restful holiday period. I think you guys are still on a bank holiday today on Monday, so everyone's still chilling. A lot of Dolphins talk, I guess, with the Bills getting bounced late doors in that game against the Eagles, which was a fun game. No doubt you've been catching that on Locked On Dolphins, I guess, today. So a lot going on, but nothing happening with the Marlins. It has been stone cold. I did see one of the followers of the show, Alex Ferrer, saying that there's not even been any rumors for the Marlins. That it's just been that bad and that barren. Nothing has happened, which is why this is kind of the perfect episode, I think, for today. Mainly because, well, it's a solo pod. I'm not feeling amazing, but there's, I think, a good way for the Marlins to get better, even better than what they were last year, if some of the guys on the current roster actually step up and reach more towards their ceilings. They should, in theory, get a lot better. Obviously, the Marlins are missing Sandy Alcantara for 2024. That's going to be a big blow, but one of the guys I'm going to talk about could potentially fill some innings and that void as well. So tons to get into today. This episode is sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel. Yes, sir. And you can make every moment more. Yes, that is the right script. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Oh boy, apologies. I'm coughing and all sorts here. More Negronis required. Anyway, what are the 5 steps to success here for the Marlins? This was kind of inspired by, well, there's a few things that have inspired me with this one. Firstly, I don't think the Marlins are looking to be overly active in free agency. I think they are kind of at the point of spending where they're happy and comfortable with. Things could change, but my gut feel has been free agency-wise, they aren't going to be in the running for any major free agents thus far. They may be active in the trade market, we will see, but as we know, the farm is a little bit barren, and so it may be one of those situations where the Marlins just roll with what they have. Predominantly, there's a few voids and gaps to plug. Obviously, they made some moves towards the Rule 5 protection. They've also made some moves around the non-tender deadline, etc. So they have made some moves that, in theory, kind of plug some gaps. Clearly, they need to do something at catcher, but in theory, shortstop could well be covered with Brujan. We'll wait to see on that one. He's going to be given an opportunity. So I do wonder whether like the core of this Marlins roster, well, not I do wonder, I believe the core of this roster is already here. The team won 84 games in 2023. They made the postseason. They were the 5 seeds. A lot of things went their way. Not going to lie. A lot of things went the Marlins' way in 2023. So you have to assume maybe that some of the luck will go maybe the opposite way. Their one-run win record, let's hope it doesn't completely flip, but let's say it just kind of becomes more like about 500. Then that's going to be a lot of wins the Marlins lose there. So potentially luck's going to even out. We'll wait to see. But even so, this episode is inspired by the Skip Schumacher conversation with the guys, Fish on First, Eli, Kevin, Isaac, all speaking to Skip, which was a great conversation, 40 minutes. It was funny to see Skip Schumacher get pretty heated with Eli talking about stolen bases, which I think was the funniest moment of the whole thing, to be honest with you. I completely get where Eli's questioning came from there. It was frustrating as Marlins fans to be watching the sheer amount of double plays. So I know where the question come from. And equally, John Birdie, the fact that he didn't run at all pretty much was a little bit head-scratching considering he was the major league leader in stolen bases in 22. And he was nowhere near that mark, even though the rules and the bases were more in his favor. But, I mean, that for me was one of the funniest elements of it, but one of the key elements that popped out during that conversation was Skip talking about how he's frustrated the way, guys are seeing they are who they are type of thing. And it was like, how could we continue to get guys better? And what could that look like? And that's what got me thinking for this episode. So this has been inspired by a few things. I think the Marlins are going to be quiet in free agency. They could be active in trades. Peter Bendix may even look to move some of the more expensive guys. I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see the way he plays it. But I do think there's guys on this roster right now that if they go more towards their ceiling in terms of production, then the Marlins could get better than what they were in 2023, which I think is a really intriguing proposition and one that maybe like Bruce Sherman and maybe Skip Schumacher and Peter Bendix are thinking about already. So where does this start? For me, this fundamentally starts, and Skip called this out specifically with the conversation with the guys, with Jazz Chisholm Jr. The reason it starts there is Jazz has just not been able to stay on the field for a full campaign. If you look back to his 2022 season when he was an all-star, he played second base. But in that, when you look back, he only played 60 games. 60 games in 2022. Last year, he had multiple stints out, multiple injuries, the oblique, obviously the toe, ended up having surgery on the toe, 97 games. So in reality, Jazz, he's missed a ton of time. If you almost combine, you combine those two seasons and you kind of get a sense of like what Jazz could be over a full 162, and that's why he's so valuable. There's a 35 home run guy in there. There's a 120 OPS plus type of guy. There's an 800 and something OPS guy. For the Marlins with that at center field, it's huge. Center field and center field defense that is really playing. And again, Skip spoke about this. I thought it was a really interesting thing to call out is the way that Jazz got more comfortable as it went on. Then he started to become a leader in center field too, as he kind of settled into the actual mechanics of being a center fielder, then started to be dictating where everyone should be and how everyone should be aligned, etc. So Jazz is only going to get better in center field, but he's a game changer, and the Marlins need him to be on the field for 150 plus. They do. If Jazz can be on the field for 150 plus, playing that level of defense, it's a huge upgrade and a huge boost for this club. We'll wait to see what happens in terms of maybe some of the extension opportunities. This is the really intriguing thing with Jazz Chisholm Jr., where, the Marlins may look to try to extend him in some sort of way. He has these levels of ability. He has a ceiling that is probably higher than anyone else on the roster, to be honest with you. But the injury concerns have been real. So Jazz is doing everything in his power to stay on the field. But for the Marlins, keeping him on the field is critical. Let's do our first ad, and then we'll carry on this conversation. Look at Edward Cabrera, Jesus Sanchez, Ryan Weathers, and big Nick Fortes. But this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Yes, sir. They're the sponsors and our first ad. And guys, you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. It has a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, guys, you're here with me, Peter Pratt, on Monday, the 27th of November. We are talking the 5 steps to success for this current Marlins roster to get better. Guys that can go towards their ceiling, that can help the Marlins win more games in 2024, even if they aren't overly active in free agency or via trade. We'll wait to see. We've already talked about Chisholm Jr. We know what the ceiling could look like. It's a 35 home run type campaign. It's elite center field defense. It's a 120 OPS plus. It's an 820 OPS, somewhere in that range. Chisholm Jr., frankly, is one of the best players in the game. If he can stay on the field for 150 or more, the Marlins need it big time. Let's flip over to the pitching side. This is going to be one of the main things for the Marlins heading into 24. The reason being, Sandy and his innings are not available. They need to find the innings somewhere else. They have to find the innings. And for me, one of the main opportunities here is for Edward Cabrera. Eddie Cabrera, for me, if there's a way where he can, if there's a way for Eddie Cabrera to just if he can halve the amount of walks that he gives up. If you go to Baseball Savant and look at Eddie Cabrera's profile, it is absolutely mind-blowing. It is red bars everywhere apart from the single blue bar, and it is the worst possible. It's the 1% bar on the blue, and that is for walks. Eddie Cabrera's walk ratio is just ridiculously bad. If he can find a way to fix that, and what I mean by fix it is halve his walks, then there is a huge breakout campaign possible for Eddie Cabrera. There really is. And the Marlins desperately need that. Everything else is there for Eddie Cabrera. It seems funny that the Marlins seem to have been in multiple windows looking at moving Eddie Cabrera and trading him. I understand the frustration. It felt like Skip Schumacher was frustrated with Eddie Cabrera at some points last year. He was sent down to AAA. Partly, and we believe, it was reported by Craig Mish, I believe, due to his demeanor after the game, in that he had a poor outing and his post-game demeanor wasn't kind of correlating to the performance he'd given up. And he was then almost sent down to AAA to be taught a lesson, really, as well as to try to fix things. The Marlins have Mel Stottlemyre Jr., clearly. Eddie Cabrera has all of the talent in the world. You know, as the year went on with Eddie Cabrera, we as fans became frustrated. A lot of times, I remember a lot of spaces, a lot of pods were talking about Eddie Cabrera. Is he a reliever? Is he a starter? Listen, in my opinion, Eddie Cabrera is an absolute starter. He is a starter, but he needs to halve the walks. If he halves the walks, then the Marlins have an absolute stud of a pitcher there on their hands, and they really need him to step up. But if they do, there's 150 really high-class innings out of Eddie Cabrera potentially, which the Marlins will absolutely need. Let's flip it back over to the hitting side as well. Back to this side, and it's another left-hander. We've already talked about Jazz. The Marlins have struggled. They just don't have a ton of lefties, but they, with Jesus Sanchez, he actually had a decent year, I'd say, in 2023. It wasn't amazing, but there was definitely some improvements from Jesus Sanchez. A lot more opposite field elements. The strikeout rate was down, which felt good. I felt overall we felt more confident, but from a lefty perspective, he's just been unable to put anything up against lefties. But the way right now the current outfield depth is looking, the Marlins badly need Jesus Sanchez to be able to at least take some competent at-bats against lefties and left-handed pitching. They really, really do. Because that just increases. If he is going to be an above-average hitter, then he needs to find a way to be at least average against lefties. If he is, again, that's another huge improvement for this Marlins lineup, because the other alternative right now is Avisel Garcia. And maybe Avi becomes the short side platoon on this one, facing righties. But for me, I think the Marlins clearly prefer Jesus Sanchez to be out there. I say clearly, and maybe they don't. Skip Schumacher did mention Avi and spring training, and let's see what there is there in Avi. Like the Marlins, they haven't made that move yet. The expectation was he's gone, he's done. It's November, he is not gone and he's not done. And Skip Schumacher is speaking last week to say, he's going to get another opportunity in spring. So wait to see. Maybe I should have had this. Maybe that's the 6 steps of success is Avisel Garcia has a bounce back campaign. Could you imagine? That would be absolutely wild. But other players have done it. Other players have done it. So we'll wait to see. But for me, Jesus Sanchez, what can we see in terms of progression against left-handed pitching? Against righties, it's fine. And equally, can he sustain that level? Jesus Sanchez, he is critical in many ways here for the Marlins because A, he's still relatively cheap. B, he has the power potential that not many other guys do. And it's just about, for him, being able to just add that contact level to there as well. And if you can get that power and contact going for Jesus Sanchez, then there's a really interesting major league stick there for the Marlins they absolutely need. Let's go back over to the pitching side. And for me, the funny thing is I tweeted pretty much this whole episode out in one single tweet, which you may well think, Pete, why are you doing a full episode about this one tweet? It's a great question, but I feel like I need to explain it some more. Let me know what you're thinking. But this was the one that most people called out to say, this is the most unrealistic, which I think is interesting. Ryan Weathers, traded and acquired from the Padres. And for me, this looks in many ways almost identical to the Jesus Luzardo situation. They go and get a former top stud prospect, needs a change of scenery, and they, couple of starts for the Marlins. It doesn't go great, but finishes okay. Then all of a sudden has an off season, and then comes back and shows what he can do. And for me, the way the pitching's going for the Marlins, they badly need Ryan Weathers to step up, show out in spring, crack this rotation, and then if there is 130 to 150 innings worth of work from Ryan Weathers with a sub-4 ERA, then boy, oh boy, the Marlins have absolutely nailed another one. Another one. Could it even be 4.5 ERA? This is a funny thing. I was speaking about Dylan Cease a few episodes ago, how with the rule changes, we have to look at ERA slightly differently. Like it has taken a tick upwards because of these rule changes. And so, maybe a 4.5 ERA is absolutely fine at 130 plus innings, but that's what the Marlins are going to need here. I think Ryan Weathers can do it. I think this could follow a very similar pathway to Jesus Luzardo. And if the Marlins get that out of Ryan Weathers, plus Eddie Cabrera halving those walks, plus Braxy and Jesus Luzardo and Yuri Perez, all of a sudden they have got a really young, really fun, heavy upside rotation. They really have. And it's like completely the opposite to, like, say, the St. Louis Cardinals that just keep adding old dude after old dude after old dude. They lack upside. They may lack some consistency. But for the Marlins, it is one hell of a cheap rotation, and B, a very young and talented one, which I think I prefer to be on that side of it, to be honest with you. But, Ryan Weathers, I can see having the opportunity to be a big part of the rotation. I really can. I think they'll go slow and steady with Max Meyer. Trevor Rogers, I think, is a really interesting one. He's going to be given an opportunity as well, clearly. But, there's a few ifs, buts, and maybes, but they know they're going to need at least, more than 5 starters at least. So Ryan Weathers will get an opportunity. Trevor Rogers will. All of the guys I mentioned will. Max Meyer's in the mix. Brian Hoeing still around. There's plenty of guys around that will be given innings and opportunity. All right, guys, final one. And this one for me, going back to catcher. I spoke about the catching position a few days ago. The way that the Marlins are going to underwhelm in this situation. They are not going to trade for anyone big, and they are not going to sign anyone big. The catching spot, kind of Peter Bendix has already showed his hand, where, the Marlins are going to sign a couple of guys on minor league deals, and we'll see which one sticks and which one cracks the roster. Nick Fortes is going to be your starting catcher. He's going to take 60% of the time, in my opinion. And there's going to be another guy that's going to take 1 to 2 starts each time through the rotation. I think that's the way it's going to go. So it's going to be underwhelming. Here's why the Marlins, here's why they can get better here. For me, Nick Fortes, he did get better, really much better, significantly better defensively through 23. However, the stick, whilst at times, like to the eye, it looked okay, but man, Nick Fortes really, the numbers were poor, really poor for Nick Fortes. After having, some encouraging signs with the stick early on. And that's it. Again, can the Marlins find a way to get Nick Fortes up back towards the type of numbers he had very much earlier in his small sample size of his career? If they can get something in that kind of range, then, and the Marlins just have a competent stick, an 80 WRC plus type of dude, 85 WRC plus, whatever it might be, then that with the defense that Nick Fortes can offer right now, I think that, again, would be a huge upgrade here for the Marlins. This is what it's all about. We're talking about Jazz staying on the field more so. That's a huge upgrade because it's less games of Jonathan Davis, less games of Garrett Hampson, less games of John Birdie, less games of Peyton Burdick, less games of Dane Myers. You don't need any of those dudes. You got Jazz Chisholm Jr. delivering. If Edward Cabrera can halve his walks, he is going to be dangerous in this league. If Jesus Sanchez can hit lefties at a decent enough level, plus continue his progress against righties, the Marlins really have something there. If Ryan Weathers can deliver 130 and 150 innings worth of work with a 4 to 4.5 ERA, another fat dub for the Marlins there. And Nick Fortes can get his stick to a level that is league average at a catching level, then again, another massive upgrade. These are all, that's 5 huge upgrades for the Marlins heading into 2024. And they have to do nothing with the roster. The roster is already there. Can you get these 5 guys to go more towards their ceiling? If you can, this team could be significantly better in 2024. Really significantly better. The question is the guys that really showed out in 2023, can they sustain their levels? And I think with those, you have to look at Luis Arias. Can Luis Arias do it again? You have to look at Tanner Scott. Can he do that again from a leverage reliever perspective? Can Andrew Nardi do it again? Can Luzardo do it again? Can Brax do it again? This is it. These guys who've had like career years for them, Yuri Perez as well. Can these guys sustain? And then can these 5 on this list, Jazz, Eddie, Jesus Sanchez, Ryan Weathers, and Nick Fortes, can they take the next step forward? If so, the Marlins are getting better. They are getting better, and they've had to do nothing to the roster. Let me know what you think, guys. It's going to call it a day there for Locked On Marlins on Monday, the 27th of November. Be back tomorrow as we start to consider some free agent opportunities more broadly. Free agent market has been slow, really slow. But I think it's time to start digging into some free agent options as we consider, where they're going to go from a bullpen perspective. They're going to need some help in the pen. Some guys they're no longer with the organization, but they need to maybe look to add some guys into the pen, look to do that. And also considering, is Bruhan going to be the answer at shortstop this week as well? So we'll look forward to doing that, and I'll see you soon.